everyone, and welcome to another episode of No Buts About It. It is September 10th. Week 1 of the NFL season is over. The Cincinnati Bengals lost. The Pittsburgh Steelers won. And there were a few other results throughout the week that we're probably going to talk about on the show. I'm in my dining room in Indiana. Chus, of course, is in his basement in Pittsburgh. We've got all that and more coming up next. No Buts About It. So, first thing I want to say to everyone out there is we're going to try our best to avoid another 2-hour show. It's not so much that I can't talk about football for 2 hours, it's that I can't stare at a laptop for 2 hours and talk about football. I don't know how Chus felt after that last episode last week, but I was exhausted.
It needed to be done, though. I mean, I think it needed to be done. I think we needed to go through with it. Unfortunately, we probably shouldn't have done any extra news or anything. We should have just let the show roll as what it was, which was me and Josh giving our predictions on where we think the standings are going to end for each team in each division in both conferences. So, and we elaborated on all of them. And I think it was a good breakdown personally. I don't think that I don't regret it personally, but yeah, I don't want to try to do that again personally.
Of course, we put the Vikings at the bottom of the NFC North, and then Stan, the Jet fan, texts us and says he has them winning the NFC North, which I will have Stan, the Jet fan, on tomorrow. He was very hype about the Jets 49ers game that happened last night. He said he was crying. I assume those were tears of joy because it occurred during the one drive where Garrett Wilson was just all over the field and making me jealous that the Jets were able to use him in that way that I wish the Bengals would have used Jamar Chase. But we'll discuss that more tomorrow. I'm also going to make Stan talk about the AFC East matchup that is Thursday Night Football with the Miami Dolphins going up against the Buffalo Bills. Stan doesn't know that he's going to be discussing that yet. I decided that 5 minutes before the show started. So I will text him after this and let him know. Or he'll listen to the show and he'll find out that way. But that's your first tease. Second tease is I already reacted to the Bengals game because I was depressed. I have watched the Bengals game 3 times. And the first time I watched it, I had no idea what was happening. I was very confused. I was very angry at everyone. And I then rewatched it twice on Monday, and I broke it down a little bit. That video, I will put the link in the description for the Spotify, Apple Podcast listeners.
Nice. What was that?
My phone. That was my phone.
Oh, nice.
Anyway.
Cool.
Shout out Retinal Associates of Fort Wayne for calling me right now. Anyway. I already did that breakdown.
Why would did you really want to do that breakdown? Because I feel like that's torture to have to rewatch that terrible game 3 times.
So fun fact. The Bengals game, the first time I watched it, I thought it was a lot worse. And then each watch through, it progressively got better. Oh. The ending didn't get any better, but I was able to kind of dissect and figure out some things. I was able to look at some positives, and I'm hoping Joe Burrow goes into the film room this week. And I know this is crazy, but I think he may have been the biggest problem.
It's because he dyed his hair.
Maybe, but I personally think he just is used to having to get the ball out of there so quick. He had all these conservative short throws. He had way more time than what he thought he did in the pocket for some reason, or he was dropping back out of a clean pocket. I discussed that more in that other video that I mentioned. Like I said, I'll put that in the description of Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and there will probably be like a little card up here on YouTube or something. But also, Eric All Jr., rookie tight end, looked phenomenal as a blocker. So more 12 personnel sets for the Cincinnati Bengals. But Chus, we had a matchup that I don't think either one of us liked on Thursday Night Football for NFL kickoff.
Before you go, though, they definitely.
Oh no, you You got something?
I don't, it's not like entire big news. I mean, it's kind of already what we know, but with it being Tuesday evening, like, 4:20, I guess, late afternoon, whatever you want to call it. Achane and Raheem Mostert are both listed on the injury report ahead of Thursday's game for the Dolphins and Bills. So that might be a talking point for Stan to mention tomorrow, because those are two running backs that part of the offense that Miami really relies on, especially, going in against the divisional matchup. So
Are we talking questionable, doubtful?
I'm guessing it's questionable. I mean, Achane was questionable today and yesterday. It looked like Achane is dealing with an ankle injury and Mostert is dealing with a chest injury. I didn't hear about the Mostert chest injury. I did hear about the Achane ankle injury, though. But with it being such a quick turnaround, I wouldn't be surprised if neither play. I mean, I think Mostert might be more likelier to play, but I'm no expert. I don't know. But I know that I think Achane also didn't practice yesterday, from what I remember, because both of my running backs, I have Achane in one of the leagues with Kenneth Walker as well. Kenneth Walker, they didn't mention anything about him Monday when I checked, but they did mention that Achane was not listed. He was like a non-participant in practice. So, but I figured I'd mention that since it popped up, and with it being almost 4:30 here on the East Coast, and the Thursday night football game is rapidly approaching, it's worth noting. But let's go back to last week's Thursday night football.
Yeah, Chiefs versus Ravens. So this was the NFL kickoff game. Was kind of forced to root for the Chiefs because I didn't want the Ravens to win. Yeah. And the Chiefs did win. It was a close game at times. There were some question marks on during the game. Steve Spagnuolo somehow called a timeout, even though defensive coordinators aren't supposed to be able to call a timeout. And then there were a ton of illegal formation penalties on the Ravens offensive line. But Chus, what were your initial thoughts following that game?
There's a couple things with it when it came to Baltimore and Kansas City. I think, first of all, the one thing when it comes to Baltimore, a lot of people were skeptical of Derrick Henry. And I think a lot of people were mentioning how Derrick Henry might be washed. He's not going to do well with Baltimore. The line's different. Well, Derrick Henry ended up doing pretty well. He ended up recording a touchdown. And honestly, it looked like he picked up right where he left off. I mean, I think in a way also with that Friday game, and I know we really aren't going to talk too much about it, but I think it kind of showed same thing with Saquon Barkley on that Friday night game with the Packers and Eagles as well. Saquon really beat those washed allegations. He really had himself a day on Friday. But going back to Thursday night football, Derrick Henry, I think, really showed, because I'm pretty sure, if I'm not wrong, he scored the first touchdown of the game, if I'm not wrong, or one of the first touchdowns. If it wasn't him, it was Xavier Worthy, which is another guy that I would really like to highlight, because Xavier Worthy, not that I didn't expect, big numbers from him, but I didn't expect them so quickly right out of the gate. But it really shows what Kansas City is going to be doing in their offense this year, because it appears that, from my opinion, from my perspective, Kansas City has more weapons that they can work with than they did last year. And that's saying a lot. Well, it's saying a lot more, and it's kind of a good thing, because Kansas City really had tough weapons to work with last year. Night football. I mean, Kadarius Toney is he's a tough look. But what is this clip? What are we looking at here?
I just discovered this minutes ago. Keep going. Just ignore this. I got plans.
Okay. So I was pretty impressed with Derrick Henry as well as Xavier Worthy. I think that it really kind of showed for Kansas City that they have a lot more weapons, as I mentioned, to work with. They have Worthy, they have Rice. Even though Juju didn't record he had like one pass to him. Yeah, I mean, these players have some sort of weapons, which is good. You still have Pacheco, and honestly, I think Kansas City kind of looks a little better than they even did last year, which is crazy, because that team was a Super Bowl team. And it's kind of concerning for the AFC, because I really don't want to see the Chiefs in the Super Bowl again and try to three-peat, especially since the NFC is not the strongest right now. And San Francisco clearly can't beat Kansas City, whether they are really good or having Kadarius Toney as their wide receiver too. But it was a good game, and a storybook ending. Great way to start off the NFL season. I mean, you couldn't get better than that last play with the inches out of bounds. Inches. legitimately inches out of bounds. It was a phenomenal storybook way to end it. The NFL script writers were unbelievable. And yeah, it was beautiful, but great game nonetheless. Jokes aside, it's a joke, guys. It's a
Lamar
joke.
said it wasn't out of bounds. He said that in his press conference. He goes, I don't think he was out of bounds. So
I mean, he definitely was. He had either, or like, I don't know how big the shoe size is, but his shoe don't lie.
He was out by a shoe size.
He was out by.
He was wearing them 13s and need to be wearing them 12s.
Yeah, because maybe then they wouldn't have been out of bounds. But nonetheless, yeah, I was really impressed. I also, which I know that you wanted to mention the tight end situation with Baltimore. I also want to mention that they used Justice Hill a lot more in this game than I thought they would. He was really prominent part of the receiving backcourt that they were doing over in Baltimore as well. I mean, nobody's really talking about it, but I think that it should be relatively highlighted. You know, he had a pretty decent day.
Yeah, and let's talk about tight ends here at the end. We'll talk about the offensive line first. You mentioned Xavier Worthy, and I am going to show you this play because I just think this play is really funny. I forgot about it before we started the show, and then it clicked in my head. But when you mentioned Derrick Henry, but Xavier Worthy. Now, John Ross has given me PTSD about probably not the proper term, but just I am fearful of drafting speedy wide receivers for the sake of drafting speedy wide receivers. And I know Xavier Worthy, he showed promise in a lot of other ways. But that was my worry with Xavier Worthy. That was my worry with Jamison Williams, who we finally got to see. And both of those guys had great games this week. Xavier Worthy came out on that jet sweep, and week one knee-jerk reaction, but we may have accidentally let Patrick Mahomes get Tyreek Hill back in a younger and newer form.
Yeah, which is concerning.
People are saying the league let this happen. No, the Buffalo Bills let this happen because the Buffalo Bills needed to draft a wide receiver, and instead of drafting Xavier Worthy, they drafted Keon Coleman, who Keon Coleman may not be bad, but the team that let Patrick Mahomes get a new wide receiver is the Buffalo Bills.
Mm-hmm.
Not the Bengals, not the Steelers. They weren't in a position to draft Xavier Worthy.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't need Xavier Worthy.
Well, Steelers could have used the receiver, but I think
you needed line guys more though.
We definitely did
at the time.
Continue. And I still believe that too. I think I still agree with the decisions. But go ahead.
But yeah, I just think that Xavier Worthy could end up being a problem for AFC East teams that aren't the Kansas City Chiefs. But let's I want to show you this clip here, and I want to make sure I have it marked at the right spot. I want you to look at the middle linebacker here. There's two plays on this clip, so I'm going to make sure it's the correct one. But middle linebacker is Drew Tranquill from Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Yeah.
And I want you to just pay attention to him and see how he tackles Derrick Henry.
I think I've seen this play. I think I know what you're talking about. I've seen this. Yeah.
So for those of you who didn't notice, Drew, who's right here, number 23, instead of going after Derrick Henry, who has the ball, looks like he's running between the tackle and the guard here on the left side. Drew just grabs Isaiah Likely, the tight end, and just tosses him into into Derrick Henry. And that is how he tackles Derrick Henry. So I guess if you don't have the size or necessarily the speed to tackle Derrick Henry, you can just use his own players against him on his team. That was what I wanted to show you. Didn't know if you'd seen that.
I did, or I at least heard about it. I didn't watch the play occur. I didn't really notice it when it happened. People were talking about it on X and Instagram and whatnot. So I did hear about this. I think maybe even you mentioned it. So because, obviously it's Drew Tranquill, the man from Fort Wayne, Indiana, the legendary Drew Tranquill. But yeah, I did hear about it. It's kind of an interesting concept, but I don't think he actually genuinely meant to do that. I think it was just the matter of Drew Tranquill ran into Isaiah Likely with more force and Likely fell over and tripped Derrick Henry. But yeah, I get it. Drew Tranquill's.
He was like, "You're gonna try to block me? Well, reverse block on you." But let's talk about that offensive line situation in Baltimore. So Baltimore has a ton of new movement on their offensive line. They've got some guys who left. For example, Morgan Moses is on the Jets now. I wasn't super impressed with their offensive line. Ronnie Stanley again had those illegal formation penalties.
Yeah, that I forgot about, but that is definitely something worth noting. I mean, that was really ridiculous. I mean, they got those like 3 or 4 times. It was ridiculous, even more. But I know in the first half it was rough.
Right, and Lamar's able to scramble, and he was able to scramble successfully. But I don't think they blocked well for Derrick Henry. I think something we're going to have to pay attention to for the Baltimore Ravens is whether they are able to come together on that line and build chemistry to help Derrick Henry, to help Lamar Jackson. Because I know Lamar can scramble, and I know he can do it, but he does not want to do that every play. And the reason I bring this up without going super in-depth into it is I think that is what is causing our tight end confusion here. So we have this newish offensive line, or new to each other offensive line. Mark Andrews, a lot of people I saw on X were saying, why isn't Mark Andrews on the field? Why isn't he getting snaps? What happened? Isaiah Likely's getting all the snaps. Well, I looked it up. Actually, Mark Andrews had more snaps than Isaiah Likely. But Mark Andrews was lining up in line. He had 13 blocking snaps. I think 3 of them were run blocks, and then the other 10 were pass blocks. He had 53 total snaps, I want to say, here. And he only had 2 targets on 2 receptions. So, of course, all the fantasy football fans are like, hey, what the heck is this? I drafted this guy like 3rd round for some reason to be my tight end. So he had 13 inline snaps, 38 slot snaps, 8 out wide, and that was for a total of 59 snaps on the Baltimore Ravens offense. He didn't go out for passes a lot for some reason. Or if he did, Lamar just didn't throw him the ball. Again, he was only targeted twice on 59 snaps. And 46 of those were ones where he could have ran routes. He wasn't a dedicated blocker. Isaiah Likely, on the other hand, had close to the same amount of snaps as Mark Andrews. He did have less over time. However, he lined up out wide more. He lined out in the slot, and he had 12 targets. Isaiah Likely was targeted 12 times, had 9 receptions for 111 yards and a touchdown. So now the question people are asking is, do I need to drop Mark Andrews in fantasy because Isaiah Likely is the new tight end in Baltimore? And I think there's a lot of people overreacting personally. Because if you haven't followed the Baltimore Ravens in any capacity, you're probably like, who the heck is Isaiah Likely? He's not a big name, but he's been around for a while with the Baltimore Ravens. And Ravens fans really like him because he's been someone who, if Mark Andrews gets hurt, which he has been the past 2 seasons for long periods of time, Isaiah Likely can come in and be a trustworthy safety blanket for Lamar Jackson like Mark Andrews was. It just so happened in week 1, for whatever reason, they ran a ton of 12 personnel sets with 2 tight ends. And I don't know why. I don't know if Mark Andrews isn't quite ready to. I know he said he's 100%, but maybe he isn't ready to run those full go routes and all the stuff you expect from Mark Andrews. Maybe he is just better off running conservative, just emergency valve routes or blocking, just staying close to the line of scrimmage, while Isaiah Likely becomes that guy. The other alternative is maybe John Harbaugh's like, we don't want the defenses to know who we're going to be targeting that week. Or Lamar is just kind of going with whoever has the hot hands this week. So if you're looking at this from a fantasy football perspective, I probably, and again, this is week 1, so like our sample size is very small. We're working off 59 snaps here, not even 100 snaps. We're working off 59 total. But I don't know that you're going to want either one of them in fantasy long term, because one week Isaiah Likely is going to have the 20-point game, and another week it's going to be Mark Andrews. Or they both might just be all over the place, and you're not going to know who to start when. You may be better off just having your consistent 8-point tight end who you know you can start them. They'll get you your 8 points, and their ceiling may not be as high as Isaiah Likely or Mark Andrews, but they'll get you the points. You know what to expect from them. So I'm not mad at this from a pure football perspective. I understand why it's frustrating from a fantasy football perspective, but I think it's very smart from a actual football perspective, and that's why I want the Bengals to kind of emulate this same thing, the 12 personnel sets. I mean, the Bengals have 5 tight ends rostered. They can do this. Granted, one of them's Tanner Hudson, and he fumbled on the goal line, and I think he's a little bit overhyped by some fans. But the point is, when you have your Zay Flowers, then you've got Mark Andrews, then you have now defenses have to plan for Isaiah Likely, but they also have to plan for Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers, which Zay Flowers was wide open on the final play of the game, or the second to last play of the game.
Yeah.
And Lamar overthrew him and cost me my parlay and my fantasy football league. But moving on from that, I think this causes the defense to have to scheme more, and it will open up Mark Andrews in the future and will allow the Ravens offense to be more dynamic, more versatile.
No, I don't disagree with that. I will say I wouldn't panic when it comes to fantasy football. I mean, as you kind of alluded to, I mean, it definitely kind of would kind of make sense to watch on Mark Andrews and Likely, because obviously, like you said, it could be a flip-flop any single week. But also, I also wouldn't panic because, as you mentioned, it's only week 1 and a lot can happen. I mean, the thing is week 1, you kind of have to take fantasy football with a grain of salt. So anybody that's panicking about that needs to settle down, because any player, I'm in a 15-team league and I put up 168 points this week. Is that going to happen next week? Absolutely not. But the point being is, yeah, team did really well this week, but I don't think that every single one of my players, except minus Hunter Henry, is going to get a touchdown or more every single week. I mean, Jaden Reed had 33 points and he had 2 total touchdowns, and he had a 73-yard rushing touchdown. Like I said, I didn't really watch the game on Friday. I was traveling to Cincinnati, ironically enough. But in that game, I mean, do you think Jaden Reed's going to pop off with Malik Willis? You don't know. I mean, you have to take 1 week at a time. So for anyone panicking about Mark Andrews, just wait it out, see what happens, but don't be too nervous to pick up another tight end in the event that Mark Andrews falls off a little bit. But we'll see.
Yeah, and I just wanted to check this real quick. Isaiah Likely had very similar alignment numbers to Mark Andrews. Like I said, he had 6 less snaps. He actually lined up in line more often than Mark Andrews did. He had 8 special team snaps, so that goes into that. He lined up as an offensive lineman, or is this season? This might not be this season now that I'm looking at it, because I think PFF messed up.
Don't listen to Josh, guys. Don't
listen to those numbers. Those numbers were all wrong. These numbers are right. Okay, they're still very similar though. He lined up in line 27 times, which is again more than Mark Andrews did. He lined up out wide 4 times, which I think was pretty similar to what I said Mark Andrews did. I think I said Mark Andrews was out there 8 times. So, yeah, it's 4, 8. So, Mark Andrews was out there twice as much. And then from the slot, it was 38 times for Mark Andrews and only 21 times for Isaiah Likely. So, this really just came down to who Lamar was targeting, it seems like. And that's without looking and doing a deep dive into it. on the film, but looking at the layout and what their plans were, it seems that Isaiah Likely just had the hot hand in week 1. And that could switch like that next week. So don't freak out yet if you're a Mark Andrews owner in fantasy. Ravens fans, I think, should be excited because this is like I said like 5 minutes ago, this is scary and helps build that offense. But I want to move on to the Colts versus the Texans game.
All right, and you have more to say about this than I do. I didn't watch this game. I have players from both teams, but I wasn't really concrete following other than points and whatnot, because I'm pretty sure this game was also happening at the same time as the Steelers, Falcons, and Bengals and Patriots, and I also don't have access to those games. So
yes, I was chaotically watching all the games at the same time, and then I went and rewatched this game as well. So Colts losing to the Texans. A lot of people saw the social media highlight of Anthony Richardson throwing this. He slips and he still throws the 60-yard bomb to Alec Pierce for a touchdown. And he had it was a phenomenal play. Don't get me wrong. He had another play like that too, where he threw it. Alec Pierce came back to it, and it was another long gain. If you take those out, though, he had an okay game. There was a lot of where we kind of go back to Anthony Richardson's still really kind of a rookie. He has that strong arm, but does he have the accuracy to get it done? He's a very dynamic player, very fun player to watch. Don't get me wrong. But there were, for example, Michael Pittman Jr., I think, fell victim to this. He was like forcing balls to Michael Pittman Jr., almost like he felt like obligated to throw the ball to Michael Pittman Jr. because he was the wide receiver one or he's extended. There were plays where Michael Pittman Jr. was completely covered. Like even if you look at it from the quarterback's perspective, you look at what he's looking at, he's covered, but he still tried to fit it in there, and it didn't work out. And that's why Michael Pittman Jr. only had 4 receptions on 8 targets for 31 yards. Another issue was A.D. Mitchell. He was someone we were looking to have a great game. And there were people trashing A.D. Mitchell, saying, like, what the heck? He had 1 reception for 2 yards on 5 targets. This guy isn't ready for the NFL. Go look at the targets. For the most part, if Anthony Richardson hones in a little bit on that arm, and again, he's got a rocket. The dude can fire. But he needs to like realize. I almost wonder if him slipping helped that Alec Pierce throw, because it was perfect. And I wonder if it almost took a little bit of power out of it, because there were, I'm going to say 3 A.D. Mitchell targets that I can think of where if there had just been a little bit less power on that ball, or A.D. Mitchell had been able to be a little bit faster to catch up to it, I think A.D. Mitchell had some touchdowns. There was just too much power on the ball, and it didn't work. So Anthony Richardson, what I want to see from you going forward is just kind of hone in on that arm. Don't go 100% every single time. You've got some talented weapons. You don't need to force the ball to Michael Pittman Jr. Let him get open. You have multiple guys, and I know Josh Downs was out, but you still had Kylan Granson was out there. A.D. Mitchell was out there. Jonathan Taylor was out there, and he didn't get used enough, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. You had guys. So you don't need to force it into Michael Pittman Jr. Move towards the other guys who they're leaving open to cover Michael Pittman Jr. And then when they move right, you go left type thing. Mm-hmm. So that's what I want to see from Anthony Richardson. I think he can get it done. I'm not worried about it. He's a smart player, seems dedicated to the game, but just he's too strong for his own good. The run game was really what controlled this, though. And C.J. Stroud had a phenomenal game, too, with Nico Collins and all that. And Stephon Diggs had a great debut as a Texan. But I really think where the Colts lost this game was the run game. And that's because Jonathan Taylor only had 16 attempts for 48 yards compared to Joe Mixon's 30 attempts for 159 yards. And that just causes the whole time of possession to be offset. I don't have the exact numbers here, but it is very much slanted in the Texans' favor. The Texans controlled the pace of this game. There were a lot of missed tackles from the linebacker levels. I don't think I heard Zaire Franklin's name hardly ever when it came to the Colts linebackers, which sucked because the Bengals had the same exact issue with missed tackles, which some of that can just be because they're not practicing contact during the offseason. Maybe they're a little rusty. That's fine. I'm not going to freak out about that yet. But I don't understand how you have arguably a top 3 running back in the NFL and you're only giving him 16 touches. That's 4 touches a quarter.
Yeah, it's not good at all. No. I mean, I would have preferred if he had more for the sake of those fantasy football people out there. But obviously, I mean, even just for yourself as a team, I mean, you have this supposedly elite running back in Jonathan Taylor. Why wouldn't you use him? I mean, that's just me. I mean, I feel like in a lot of these circumstances, when it comes to some of these players and these coaches and these offensive coordinators aren't using these players, or even defensive coordinators, I guess, to an extent. I mean, they're not using them, and then you wonder why you lose. Now, I mean, there's a lot more to it why the Colts lost. I mean, you've already kind of elaborated on that, but also it's kind of frustrating because if they would have done something differently, maybe not a pass play, and they would have ran the ball with Jonathan Taylor, did a screen to Jonathan Taylor, or did just something else with Jonathan Taylor, would they have been in more of a position to win? I mean, you got to ask yourself that. I mean, I've been wondering that about a lot of players just throughout the last couple of years. You know, I mean, you talk about that with Arthur Smith, Kyle Pitts. I mean, we'll talk about this. Kyle Pitts had a touchdown, you know, in the Steelers-Falcons game, but he barely got any touches last year. And he was supposed to be like a huge tight end, you know, I don't want to say generational tight end, but he was supposed to be a really good tight end.
But he was drafted, I think, 5th overall in the 2021 draft. He was supposed to be a generational tight end.
Oh, so there you go. So I stand corrected. He was supposed to be a generational. But the point being is,
right.
but moving from that back to this situation, I mean, Jonathan Taylor has shown what he can do, especially when he's healthy. Obviously, injuries have plagued him over the last couple of years. But as we have mentioned and alluded to on the show multiple times and talked about all throughout the offseason and leading into this first week of the NFL season, we've mentioned that Jonathan Taylor isn't going into this offseason hurt. He's coming in fully 100% healthy. You don't have to be concerned about using Jonathan Taylor, Indianapolis. He's fine. He's going to be good. And so I 100% agree with that. I mean, that is absolutely absurd.
And it helps out the passing game too, because when you have, and Shane Steichen knows this, most people know this. This is just obvious. When you have a good run game, it helps out the pass game because then the defense has to cover both. They can't play one-dimensional football then. And that's what the defense is constantly trying to force the team to do. Which is kind of what the Rams were forced into doing by the Lions defense. And we'll talk about that here in a minute as well. But why, when you have Jonathan Taylor, you're struggling at times in the passing game, run the ball, get the run game going, and then when they start moving their guys forward to stop the run game, that's when you go over the top to Michael Pittman Jr. That's when you go over the top to A.D. Mitchell. Even if it's a quick throw, it may not be a fun, big play type thing, but even if it's just like a quick 10-yard pass, that can be huge because then the defensive coordinator has to adjust. They've got to cover the flat, but they also have to cover the deep ball. They also have to cover the gaps for the run game. And I looked it up here. The Colts had the ball for 20 minutes of the game compared to the Texans 40. That means the Texans had possession of the ball for almost 3/4 of football in that game. And I think a lot of that has to do with the run game. So, Indianapolis Colts. Going into this game against the Packers, you know that Malik Willis is starting. You know that Jaden Reed had a great game with Jordan Love. Malik Willis does not scare me. We saw they were trying to hype him up at the end of the game in Brazil on Friday. And they were saying, hey, look, he's going to come out. He's got this huge opportunity to come out, make a Hail Mary pass, and he just flopped. He just did. I have never been on the Malik Willis hype train. Even back before he was drafted, I couldn't see why he was even being projected as a first-round guy.
Malik Willis.
And that's no hate to like him as a person. It just didn't make sense to me. I think he got way too hyped up, and him – I think
that whole entire quarterback class, though. I mean, we've talked about this. The best quarterback out of that class was Brock Purdy, and you know,
right.
I mean, so
and he was a seventh round Mr. Irrelevant. So
yeah, so I mean, go figure. But yeah, I remember us talking about him. Cool.
You know, the Packers are going to have to go to the run game with Josh Jacobs. You know that already. Are they going to try to make some passes? Yes, but they're going to try to control this ball game and keep it a low-scoring game so that their offense can needs to put up as few points as possible to win. What the Colts need to come out and do is, yes, make some dynamic plays, do some passes, but run the ball, man. You have Jonathan Taylor. Why is Jonathan Taylor getting 16 touches a game? That is unacceptable if I'm a Colts fan.
No, I agree, and I'm not a Colts fan. I mean, you're closer to Indianapolis than I am. I'm 5.5 hours. You're probably like 2.
If we go into this Packers game as the Indianapolis Colts, and Jonathan Taylor is still getting 16 touches a game, I would be livid.
I'd be dropping,
especially if they
Taylor
lose
in fantasy, guys. No, I'm playing.
but that's my expectation for the Colts going up against the Packers. Is Jonathan Taylor needs to have the ball. Yes, Anthony Richardson can do some stuff, hone in that arm, work on that against this Packers. Packers have very good corners, though, as well. So even before this, you should have been planning on a run-based scheme, in my opinion, because the Packers' corners are overlooked, but they're very good. So those are my thoughts. Chus, you've got Steelers versus Falcons up next. Justin Fields started for the Steelers, and he's going to start again this week. What did you think about his start this past week? And then are you scared about him starting this upcoming week or excited?
So the Steelers, I actually, when it comes to playing this week, I'm not really that nervous because we're playing the Broncos, but we'll get into that in a little bit here. But I kind of want to talk about the Steelers as a whole against the Falcons. When it came to Justin Fields, I don't live tweet typically. I'm not as big of a live tweeter as Mike Seitz. Shout out Mike Seitz, or even Josh for that matter. But here and there, I do like to live tweet because they both have kind of rubbed off on me. But one of the things that I did say at the beginning, which initially I deleted the first tweet because initially I was going to start crapping on the offense because the first couple of plays did not look too hot. It was like a dropped snap. Fields, I'm pretty sure had a missed throw. It was just not looking too hot. But we came around and everything looked pretty decent. But one of the things that I said was that it was kind of a nice breath of fresh air that we actually have a relatively competent team that actually can move the ball and isn't going 3 and out every single drive or doing jet sweeps. And now, granted, we did have some weird plays that we did run, which I was not really sure why we would run them, such as a kind of revert. It wasn't really like a jet sweep, but it was I don't even know what you would call it. But George Pickens got tackled 5 yards backwards. It was stupid. But overall, in the first half, Justin Fields looked great. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was 10 for 12. He had a 96 quarterback rating. He looked really good. He looked pretty solid. And honestly, when it came to Justin Fields as a whole, I wish that we would have seen a touchdown. I think the offense needs to clean up some things. But I think one of the things that I like about this offense in comparison to last year's offense is even though we are running the ball and doing stupid stuff, like Josh, for example, you said, why would they run it on 3rd and goal with Cordell Patterson on, why would you do that? Well, in difference from last year to this year, the defense was constantly on the field. At this point, you can have Cordell Patterson run up the middle and get no gain, and it won't matter because that clock's still ticking and gives the defense even more time to rest, which was not something that the defense had the opportunity to do last year, because every time it was always 3 and out. They would do these weird passes, they would do these runs and all these dumb plays that would never work and always would end up in stoppages of plays. So therefore, in this game, you would have a lot of runs, and I noticed there was a lot of runs with surprisingly no Jalen Warren though. Not a lot of Warren. It was a lot of Cordell Patterson and Najee Harris, which if you're a fantasy football owner, I would say Warren's stock is kind of going down a little bit. Patterson's might be going a little bit up because with Arthur Smith's offense, they might be using more of a Smith Najee. And I personally think that Jalen Warren should be used more as a receiving running back, because there was a play that Najee dropped in which I feel like if you had it thrown to Warren, I feel like he would have caught it. Not that Najee's not a good person to catch the ball, but I trust more in Warren in those situations. George Pickens on the offense looked really, really good. Now, I will say the referees were kind of selling. I'm not going to lie. Maybe that's just my bias towards the Steelers, but like, my goodness, there was a lot of me and Connor talked about it yesterday. Shout out Connor. He's been on the show. He's a friend of the show. We talked about it yesterday on Discord while we didn't watch Monday Night Football. We actually watched Monday Night Raw. Shout out WWE season premiere. But we were talking about it, and we kind of felt that some of the things were questionable. Like, there was a great throw, beautiful throw. I cannot express to you the excitement that I had when Justin Fields would throw the ball sometimes, because he actually sometimes has a cannon, and he tossed that ball up to George Pickens, beautiful fadeaway, and George Pickens got an offensive pass interference for barely pushing off on whoever the cornerback was that was guarding him. And I was so livid because there's been so many worse offensive pass interferences that not necessarily on the Steelers, but just in general that I've seen that were not called. And I was really mad that it happened, because George Pickens didn't even like really fully extend. He just kind of like tapped him almost and then caught the ball. And everyone was like it was ridiculous. And then there was offsetting penalties for something that one of the linemen did. Like, there was a lot of dirty stuff that was happening. I didn't agree with what Jesse Bates did. I thought that what he did was a little ridiculous. And I also felt that there was a weird, I can kind of understand with the penalty with the punter and stuff like that. But Steeler fans were we were up in arms. I was too. Dude, one of the players for the Falcons ran into the kicking leg of the punter while he was being blocked, kind of like pushed and like knocked this guy over, ended his season, and we got a holding penalty, and we had to re-kick the ball with Chris Boswell. They were literally trying to sell. So screw you, referees, and no offense to Atlanta, but screw you guys too for having the favoritism in the league, because everyone thought the Falcons were going to win. Well, for you, when it comes to the defense, you couldn't stop it. And when it comes to the Falcons, I'm not too worried about the offense when it comes to the Falcons. And look, I actually genuinely respect Atlanta. I'm just messing with you guys.
Should Michael Penix Jr. get the start next week in Monday Night Football?
I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. The thing is one of the things with this is that the Steelers defense, I know a lot of people talk very highly of, but I think it's miles better than what it was last year. And I think with the way that the offense is running, with the time ticking and more usage of running the ball and not as many passing plays, and not that there wasn't a lot of passing plays, there was. And like I said, Justin Fields would scramble a lot, which also helps because you're still running clock. I think that Kirk Cousins just was struggling with the pressure. I think you have Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt running at you, and the pressure's even with Cam Hayward on that defensive line. I mean, that is a lot of pressure. And not only that, but you've got guys like Deshaun Elliott and Dante Jackson that are in that backfield, also with Minka, that are great for just defensive coverage, which got Deshaun Elliott, a new safety we just picked up, who got an interception, and Dante Jackson, who we got from the Deontay Johnson trade from Carolina, who also had the go ahead interception after TJ Watt had pretty sure, I don't remember exactly because there was a lot of weird things. Atlanta called a lot of penalties on right when TJ Watt would do something. Like, I remember TJ Watt got a strip sack and it fumbled, and they recovered it, and they called illegal hands to the face or something like that on one of our players. And I was really mad. So it was just a lot of things that I was just very very frustrated with when it came to that. But shout out Scotty Miller for coming up clutch at the end, for being a placeholder after our punter got hurt as well. At the end of the day, I mean, we've seen a lot of placeholders mess up even 20-yard field goals after injuries like that. So it's really good that he came up clutch. Chris Boswell obviously had many field goals and also punted the ball very, very good and set up for a really good safety play. But when it comes to Kirk Cousins, going back to that, I personally wouldn't. I think it's his first time playing in a new stadium. Well, not the first time he's ever playing in the stadium. First time he's ever played for the Atlanta Falcons when it comes to this. So it's first time in this new stadium, a new scheme and whatnot with Atlanta. And obviously you couldn't have picked a worse matchup with the Pittsburgh Steelers with the defensive rush game. And also on top of that, it's always a home game. So you're still going to, that stadium was filled with Steelers fans. So I'm sure that still bugged him. It's a little different than being in Kansas City and having that. And, because when you're in Kansas City, there's a lot of Chiefs fans and stuff like that. I feel like the Chiefs fans growing, but I mean, I feel like in a couple of weeks, maybe even next week, or in a couple of weeks when Atlanta's actually home and has like an actual straight up home game, and they're not playing the Steelers, it might be better for them. But I wouldn't give up on Kirk yet. I think it was just the Steelers defense just looked really good.
One thing I want to ask you about Justin Fields before we move on. I noticed on his passing chart that Justin Fields didn't really pass in the middle of the field. Most of his passes were outside the numbers. Do you have concerns about Justin Fields not utilizing the middle of the field? Would you like him to do that more often? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, if throwing to the sidelines and throwing to the corners and whatnot are working, don't fix what ain't broken. I mean, if he's more comfortable throwing on those sides and he's getting the ball into first down territory every single time, I would say screw it. Who cares about throwing in the middle? I mean, obviously it doesn't let some of those wide receivers in the slot and whatnot get those receptions. But I think if he's more comfortable with that, then I would say more power to him. I don't have any concerns with it. I mean, the thing that made me happy was that George Pickens actually got the ball. He actually was very much utilized. I mean, obviously he didn't have a touchdown, but he still was utilized. He would have had a huge gain if it wasn't the offensive pass interference. And I'm really excited to see what it looks like going forward. And I'm a little concerned with Russell Wilson coming in week 3 if Justin Fields picks up a win in Denver. I'm just saying, I mean, because at that point, if Russell Wilson comes in the home opener against the Chargers and poops himself, Steelers fans are going to be calling for Fields to start again. So, and Steelers fans, they get mad. We get mad. I'm not going to lie about that. We've had a lot of quarterback issues over the last 2 years. We're not dealing with it again, especially if Fields is decent enough to win us games. And that's all you need.
All righty. So that was Steelers Falcons. We're going to continue to listen and keep an eye on the Steelers. Chus has got some defensive guys he's got his eye on, of course. Possibly getting some videos out on them.
Yeah, hopefully Dante Jackson and Deshaun Elliott, those are the two guys I'm looking at.
So
may even do one on Beanie. We'll see.
Maybe Beanie. So subscribe so you don't miss potential videos on Beanie. But let's move on to the Sunday Night Football game that Chus did not watch yet, but I think he needs to go and watch it because this was a nail biter, ended in overtime, started off Lions 17-3, and then the Rams came back. Now, if you are looking for breakdowns of the schemes and the plays from the Lions side of the ball, you need to go check out Dose of Dion on YouTube. He has phenomenal breakdowns. We've had him on the show before. Just a great guy, great football mind. Love learning from him what the Lions are looking for. But I want to talk about Jameson Williams. We have to mention it. Jameson Williams, I mean, he's been a guy who we've heard about his potential for years. He had his, I believe it was an ACL injury when he was drafted, and then it was the gambling suspension. He didn't really get going. But you know what? This season, he came out flying. 5 receptions for 121 yards and a touchdown. Jameson Williams, have yourself a day. And people were like, why is Amon-Ra not getting the ball as much? Why is Sam Laporta not getting the ball?
I literally said that before we started the show, because because Josh asked me, he was like, "Did you watch?" I was like, "No, I was doing homework." And he was like, "Well, you should go back and watch." I'm like, "Probably will, maybe." And I was like, "Why didn't Amon-Ra not get the ball?" And he said, "We'll talk about it on the show."
And I don't have like some super like in-depth wise answer here as to why Amon-Ra didn't get the ball, why Sam Laporta didn't get the ball. Other than I think you just throw to the hot hand. Jameson Williams was having himself a night. You keep going to Jameson Williams. And then once the game starts getting closer, once the Rams started coming back, you want to control that time of possession. Going back to the run. You have David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. You can run the ball. Sam Laporta can block. It worked out. So they ended up winning that game in overtime. But what I want to focus on with the Lions is their defense. Now, I'm going to disagree with Dion a little bit. He, in his video, and again, it's a phenomenal breakdown, phenomenal video. He seemed to really think that the Lions had finally completely meshed together, that they had figured it out, that their chemistry was there, everything was perfect was very good on defense. I'm going to say that it was conceptually there. There were a few things that I would have liked to see the Lions do more. And by conceptually, I could see what they were wanting to do. And I liked the ideas that I was seeing Aaron Glenn bring out. For example, something I really liked was Brian Branch would start out high at safety, and sometimes he would come down into coverage and steal the flat. And that kind of threw off Matthew Stafford a few times. Carlton Davis looked great. He's a guy they brought in. That secondary, though, while it was better, I still need to see more from them. Terrion Arnold looked great. Just needs to build some more chemistry. Aiden Hutchinson had a great game. That pass rush was there. Marcus Davenport was a great compliment to him. But I'm not sure that we have seen – I'm not sure this was a fair matchup. And I say that because what happened was Puka Nacua got injured very early on. And then you really only had Cooper Kupp. Tyler Johnson had some nice plays. And again, that goes back to kind of the I'm not sure if that Lions defense is quite there in the secondary when you've got Tyler Johnson looking good. Kyron Williams kind of became a non-factor. Matthew Stafford tried getting the ball to him a few times, but he had no block. There were a few plays, if you go back and watch this, where I just felt bad for Kyron Williams because Kyron Williams would like catch the ball and look, and like Carlton Davis or someone would already be there, and there was nothing for him to do. Like he was just dead in the water. So that being said, Kyron Williams still had 50 yards on 18 attempts. He had 3 receiving yards. So again, Rams need to block a little bit better, but they have that beat up O-line. And that's why I'm kind of wondering, Aiden Hutchinson, did you have a great game because of the beat up O-line? Which Aiden Hutchinson's a dog, don't get me wrong. But Steve Avila went out early. Puka Nacua went out early. Matthew Stafford ended up throwing the ball like 50 times for 300 yards. So you'd gotten them into this one-dimensional defense, their offense, which we talked about with the Colts, which is what defenses are trying to do. So the Lions defense succeeded on that front. I'm just not sure that their coverages weren't helped by the pass rush, given the fact that the Rams offensive line was already very beat up, and then they lost their left guard, and you have Aiden Hutchinson essentially going up against third stringers on a reworked offensive line. I like the concept. I'm not dogging the Lions at all. I just want to see more with the Lions, and they have an opportunity to show that this was not a fluke in the secondary, and I believe they can. Like I said, they're Buccaneers. Buccaneers are not a bad team. You've got Baker Mayfield had a very good game week 1. Mike Evans, Hall of Fame wide receiver. Chris Godwin, very good. You're going to have Rashad White at the running back. He's decent. So they're going to have some stiff competition there on offense. This Lions defense is going to have to show out. I'm excited. I'm excited for them. I think they'll be a fun team to watch. We're gonna keep watching them, keep an eye on them. Maybe have Dion on the show to break some more things down for us. But Chus hasn't watched that game yet, so he has nothing to say. What he did watch though, and I didn't watch, was Cowboys versus Browns.
Yeah.
So Dak Prescott, right before this game started, became the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. He did hit that $60 million a year average mark that we're kind of talking about him maybe hitting. How did he do? Did he live up to the hype, Chus?
Personally, I mean, in the game, I mean, his stats don't show much. He had 179 yards and a touchdown. He didn't really look like he was some sort of next gen quarterback per se. I mean, obviously, we already know what to expect from Dak, but it wasn't like this was something like, oh, as soon as he got re-signed that he threw, like he pulled up Josh Allen numbers and had, 4 total touchdowns in the game. No, he had 1. And I think it came a lot with the defense. I mean, and I guess Zeke in a way as well. But I think Dak looked all right. Okay. But I mean, he looked better than whatever the frick Cleveland thinks that they have with Deshaun Watson. I still don't understand what they see in that guy. I mean, I want to look at Watson's numbers because I actually didn't look, but watching that game and trying to justify Deshaun Watson going to Cleveland just makes no sense to me. I mean, I guess 169 yards and a touchdown and 2 interceptions. He had 5 attempts for 39 yards in rushing. It looked like Dak only had 1 attempt. But point being is that dude was missing wide open throws. Amari Cooper, I felt bad for. He just wasn't getting the ball to him. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, I know you wanted me to touch a little bit on Tom Brady and how Tom Brady sounded. I didn't think he sounded that bad. I know people are giving him a hard time. I mean, it's week 1. Yeah, I mean, Tom Brady is, I feel like it's interesting to have Tom Brady in the booth considering he was never, I feel like in my day, I never really noticed him as like much of a talker. He was just kind of like, yeah, we won the game. You're like, yep. That was the same thing with like Bill Belichick. I was like, oh, that's interesting when I don't know. Is he on any of those platforms yet? I know.
Oh yeah. I've heard Bill Belichick talk more in the last year than I have in like every year prior combined.
That's what I mean. So it's like,
he's on InstaFace now too.
I think we're giving Tom Brady a little bit of a hard time, but something that Connor, another shout out to Connor, friend of the show. I think something he mentioned, I don't know if Tom Brady mentioned it while he was in the booth or what, but I thought it was pretty interesting because Connor mentioned it. But apparently when Deshaun Watson, and I don't know the truth is to this, and I have to look it up, but apparently Brady or somebody kind of low-key exposed Deshaun Watson because apparently down in Houston, he was still using like a very similar playbook to what Clemson was when he got drafted. And now being in Cleveland, they're using like an actual NFL playbook, and Deshaun Watson just hasn't figured out how to do it because Houston actually used like a similar Clemson playbook to when he was there. So I just found that a little interesting because maybe that's your struggles with Deshaun Watson on top of all the drama that's continuously ensuing over there, which honestly, I'm not going to lie, Cleveland Browns organization, you deserve this. Browns fans, you don't necessarily deserve this. But Browns organization, you deserve this because I love Baker Mayfield. I hope that he does so well in Tampa Bay because you guys gave up on him in a year in which he was injured for a guy that stinks. You deserve it. You deserve it. But that honestly, Dallas's defense looked great. They gave so many pressures to Deshaun Watson. There was nothing stopping Dallas. They obviously always shine really good in the season. It'll really matter of where they finish and how well they do in playoffs because obviously Mike McCarthy's on the hot seat, especially after last year, that monstrosity of the game and losing to the Green Bay Packers, causing all of this Jordan Love and Packers hype that's going on that Josh is very frustrated with. I know that he's been frustrated with, but
well, now he's hurt.
Well, now he's hurt. So
I feel kind of bad.
Yeah, I feel bad now too. But point being is that I think Dallas is going to be solid again. I mean, Dallas's defense looked really good, and I think Zeke surprised. I figured once Zeke went back to Dallas, he would look good. Apparently, he got himself more into shape. Not that he wasn't before, but I guess he really started training and hitting the weights, and he looks really good. He got himself a touchdown in the game, and I'm really excited to see what Zeke does now that he's back in Dallas. I'm happy that he's back there. I genuinely think that it's going to be a good addition for the offense and a good morale booster, not only for the team, but also for the city of Dallas, because obviously they really liked Ezekiel Elliott, and having him go and play for the Patriots, I'm sure was probably like a sad moment. I mean, when you lose a player of any sort of caliber like that, it's still sad. So having him come back, having a homecoming game with him was pretty good, but I wouldn't sleep on Dallas necessarily. I don't know how well they're going to do in the playoffs, but I think they're going to have a really good season once again.
Real quick, just before we head out, how long do you wait before you put Jameis Winston in as the starter for the Cleveland Browns? Because, I mean, Deshaun Watson hasn't been good. He hasn't shown he can be good. He is a PR nightmare at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you're hearing. I mean, even like allegedly or not. I mean, at this point, he's allegedly getting sued again for allegations that happened back 4 years ago, which was the whole part of the scandal leading into the last couple of years. He's getting sued again. So, like you said, PR nightmare. Continue with your question.
Well, I mean, I know his contract's fully guaranteed and you're not going to get out of that, but at what point are you just, as the Cleveland Browns organization, you're just like, we are going to disconnect ourselves from this guy as far as possible? I mean, not that any amount of football skill justifies any of those actions, but there is literally no benefit for the Cleveland Browns to keep Deshaun Watson at this point.
Yeah, I mean, not a happy fan base either. You could hear at halftime, you heard the boos from the Cleveland Browns stadium erupt because everyone was so mad. It made me feel like I was watching an alternate timeline with the Steelers, because the Steelers at halftimes in different circumstances like that they would boo. They booed Mitch. They'd boo Kenny. They'd boo the offense. And now they're doing the same thing in Cleveland. And honestly, I think that symbolizes a change at some point. Obviously it was against Dallas. So, and like we said, Dallas is a very good defense. So I guess as the organization, you have to give them you have to give him the benefit of the doubt skill level wise. Cause like, oh, Dallas is a good defense, similar to how I'm giving Kirk Cousins the benefit of the doubt because he's going up against the Steelers. But when it comes to the Browns, I would look towards the schedule. They play the Jaguars on Sunday, they're pretty decent. I mean, I wouldn't put them as in the same level as a Dallas, but they're going to be all right. But some of the teams that you have to watch out for is then you go home after the Jaguars because you go to Jacksonville. You have to play at home against the Giants, who are supposedly not good. And then you also have to play at the Raiders, who also are not supposed to be good. And then you play at the Commanders, who are questionable in the skill level because you have a rookie quarterback working with a bunch of veterans that may or may not be too old, and are they meshing together or not? So I think by the time you reach the Eagles game, I think at that point you might have to make an executive decision, because at this point, I mean, the way that they played against the Cowboys, I wouldn't be surprised if they have maybe 2 wins by the time that Eagles game comes out, by the time that they reach mid-October.
You said they play the Giants at home?
Yeah.
The Cleveland's at home?
Yeah, Cleveland's at home for the Giants game.
So I think if you lose to the Giants in Cleveland, I think that's what, even if like going into the half, you're losing to the Giants, I would say if I'm Kevin Stefanski, like, this is ridiculous. Deshaun, you're sitting. I don't care if his contract is fully guaranteed.
No,
he's a mess.
You can't. And I think that's also kind of what the Steelers did and why Kenny got mad, because although Kenny was the first round draft pick in the future and blah, 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 and all of that, he went with the hot hand, which was Mason Rudolph. He kept with it. And although we lost in the first round of the playoffs, I trusted more in Mason than having Kenny Pickett go back in midway through everything that we were working so hard for. I agree with that decision. And when it comes to Deshaun Watson, like you said, who knows? Maybe Jameis Winston is good. Like, maybe he ends up being the answer that you need. You didn't think Joe Flacco would be the answer for Cleveland last year, but he was. I mean, they didn't win the playoff game, but he actually showed some hype in Cleveland, probably since Baker Mayfield, because you can't tell me that Deshaun Watson as a Cleveland fan is making you excited to be there. Like, you cannot tell me that, oh yeah, I'm sitting in this stand and Deshaun Watson is the guy in Cleveland. Like, there's no way. And I'm not saying Winston is either, but at least maybe, the man who threw 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in a year can actually lead you to like a 9-8 or a 10-7 season, which is good considering where you guys have been at in the last 10 years. I mean, we're coming a long way since 0-16. So if you guys can get a 9-8 season, even in fourth place, I mean, that's still pretty good. But right now, unless there's a change, I mean, it also kind of depends on what happens when Nick Chubb comes back. I mean, I feel like they could really orchestrate the idea that Deshaun Watson doesn't throw that much and they just give the ball 35 times to Nick Chubb. So, which also probably wouldn't work because he's hurt. and also by the time he comes back, they might be 0-8. So, I mean, I don't know. There's got to be some sort of change. I feel bad for Myles Garrett. Actually, no, I don't necessarily feel bad for Myles Garrett. I still have a grudge over the Mason Rudolph circumstance. I'm not going to lie to you, but if for that defense, I feel for some of those players because they have to deal with such a crappy team right now. And I really hope that maybe Cleveland makes me eat my words, but it's still a divisional rival, so I don't really care. But
no, Deshaun should be out of the league.
Yeah, Deshaun at this point, I don't think well, that he ain't going anywhere after his contract's over. He's done. Like after 2027 or whenever his contract's up, he's done. Like there's not a chance that he gets re-signed anywhere else. If he does, I will laugh at that team. And I hope it's not like Pittsburgh or something, because then I'll be really sad. I don't think it would be. Pittsburgh doesn't need the PR problems right now. So
such a terrible situation. But we're just over an hour, so I'm gonna go ahead and go into my spiel if Chus is okay with that.
I just want to say I did keep my promise last week. I wore my Buffalo Bills DeMar Hamlin t-shirt, and today to go into week 2, I'm wearing my Seattle Seahawks t-shirt that is supposed to be from another reality in which it is a virtual reality in Madden. This shirt is actually of a player that currently plays for the Cincinnati Bengals, known as Jordan Battle. Shout out Connor, once again, friend of the show, who got me this t-shirt because of our addiction and obsession with Madden during the COVID years. But Jordan Battle was my legendary safety coming out of Alabama. And although the number is not correct, and obviously the team is not correct, it's still a fun shirt to have. I'm not going to be able to wear it much longer because it's getting kind of small on me, but I wanted to wear it for the show. Seattle also had a pretty solid win in Denver, even though it's Denver, so I don't really expect too much. But yeah, shout out to Jordan Battle and the Seahawks, and we'll see what I wear next week. But I think that's all I got.
Hopefully, it's your Jordan Battle Bengals shirt next week.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I ordered it today or tomorrow, I don't know if it would come on time. So it might have to be something else, unfortunately.
Oh well. Well, let's go into the spiel. Thank you for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We can be found anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube at No But Show. Our social media pages are NoButts_show on Instagram and No But Show on TikTok. My Twitter is Josh_Butts_2001. And if you would like to reach us, you can email us at bullmoosepodcast2, that's the number 2, @gmail.com. Finally, our spread shop will be in the description, so check out the merch. Once again, if you enjoyed today's show, like, comment, and subscribe. We are 115 YouTube subscribers away from 500, and that means we are 115 YouTube subscribers away from our next giveaway. So make sure to subscribe, and until next time, go do something nice.